Welcome to the episodes, Dr. Andrew Nierenberg. I'm saying that right, Nierenberg?
That's right. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for taking the time. Obviously, it means a lot. Dr. Nierenberg is the director of the Dauten Family Center for Bipolar Treatment Innovation at MGH, which is in Boston, Massachusetts, correct?
That's right. Massachusetts General Hospital.
Massachusetts General Hospital. So tell us a little bit about what you do there, what's going on, and sort of what your role is at the hospital.
So I direct the Dauten Family Center for Bipolar Treatment Innovation, where we provide both direct care and we do a lot of research to see if we can improve the lives of people with bipolar disorder. We're affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and we also do a lot of teaching. That's the other one of our missions. So we do clinical care, research, and teaching and training. And we have a broad portfolio of research.
Oh, that's awesome. I wonder what got you into sort of specializing in bipolar disorder.
Well, I had done work before in depression, and my chairman at the time asked if I would move over part-time over to the bipolar program because they were expanding rapidly and they really needed help. So I moved over there in about 2020 and been there ever since.
So you know a lot about depression, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's my specialty.
That's your specialty. I don't know if Lisa briefed you at all, but I suffer from bipolar 1.
Yeah.
So I guess I just have a couple questions talking to a specialist. I've read up on certain things, but there's things that keep coming up in the episodes that we kind of don't really know a lot about. Starting with sort of the blackouts that come from a manic episode. There's parts of my life that I really try hard to remember, and people have explained to me, you did this, you did that, and I have a very bare bones recollection of being there. If you could just expand on sort of what's happening to the brain and what that is exactly, I think that would help a lot, me and some of the listeners out there get a better grip on that.
So what I can describe is what you're describing. I can't give you a brain-based explanation of it, but I can tell you what the clinical phenomenon is called.
Okay.
And it's called mood-dependent memory. And what mood-dependent memory means is that you can remember your manias when you're manic, and when you're not manic, you can't really remember them. You can remember the times that you're depressed when you're depressed better than when you're not depressed. And why that is, I don't know if anybody's really looked into those mechanisms, but I've certainly seen it. And I've seen where people will have, a manic storm. And then after they're out of the storm, they just don't really remember what they did. You know, and it's very hard for people sometimes to remember how they were thinking and what their own experience was in the midst of the storm.
Yeah, of course. Wow, that's so interesting. So people can remember their manic episodes only if they're manic.
Sometimes.
Not
all the time. There's some people who remember everything, and there's some people they just can't recall. And when I try to be helpful to people, I find it extremely useful to have somebody who knows them well with them in the evaluation. And sometimes, the story that I'll get from somebody is one thing, and then they'll turn to their loved one or somebody who knows them really well, and you'll get a completely different story. Yeah. And they'll say, don't you remember when you did that? And they go, no, not really.
Yeah, that is something that's come up a lot. I've had on like family members and friends, and the recollection is very different, to say the least.
Very different.
When you talk about the evaluation, which part of are you talking about, like the intake part of the hospitalization, or are you talking about sort of once they've been diagnosed, or what do you mean by the evaluation?
Well, I guess what I'm referring to is when I have my first contact with someone.
Okay.
And I have to do two things. I need to get their story. I need to know the narrative, what happened when and what happened next. And I need a description, not necessarily an explanation, but I just need a solid description of what went on. And then I could start to figure things out. The next part of it is to systematically go through reasonable criteria. For example, what is it that makes up a manic episode? Did somebody really have that? Was it that, they were high on cocaine at the time, as opposed to, they had a manic episode, or was it something completely different?
Right.
And that will guide the, not only my evaluation, but also what to do about it. What sort of treatment will be most appropriate for somebody.
Yeah, but I imagine getting a straight story from someone that is in a manic episode is a very difficult task. Do you find that people are truthful when they're manic, or is there a lot of deception going on once people realize that they might be getting hospitalized?
It varies, right?
Yeah.
So that it varies, because sometimes when people are in the midst of that manic storm, sometimes they really know what's going on.
Right.
And sometimes they just don't have a lot of insight. And they think that the way that they are seeing the world is the way that the world is. And they can't understand why so many people are upset around them. And, why is there so much commotion and other things going on?
Sure.
So it varies. But when mania is hot, when someone's right in the middle of it, it's really difficult for them to know what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. I've struggled a lot with telling the truth when I'm because I look at the hospital, and it might be because I've been hospitalized in very low income hospitals, but I look at it as sort of like a punishment instead of a place to get better. So I'm trying to avoid the hospital at all costs. So I've sort of manipulated the system in ways while I'm manic. I don't want to get too far into what I did, but I just wonder how difficult it must be for you to get the truth out of, are you interviewing family members and friends, or are you just getting the story from the patient?
That's why it's so helpful for me to have an informant, to have somebody who knows them, so I can get the story straight.
Okay.
You may or may not know. Hold on, I just want to tell people to be quiet upstairs. They're making a lot of noise.
Yeah, no problem. I can't hear it on my end. So.
Oh, okay. All right. As long as you can't hear it, then it's all right. I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something.
It's okay. I think we were talking about just getting an informant.
Oh, yeah. So getting someone who has an objective observation of what somebody was doing is helpful, because look, I think we're asking people to do something that's kind of impossible. We're asking people to observe themselves, to remember it, and then recall it.
Right.
Right. Right. So all of those processes can be compromised when someone is in an intense either manic state or depressed state. It can be really hard. The other thing that can happen is that in the midst of either mania or depression, people can have hallucinations or delusions. And that can make it really hard to know what's going on.
Right. That really is interesting. So, you are in a bipolar treatment innovation center. What are some of the innovations that are going on around the treatment of bipolar right now?
Well, I think some of the innovations are trying to go beyond the usual treatments that people have. And when I say beyond the usual treatments, I mean both medications and psychotherapy.
Right.
And we are trying to take advantage of medications that are prescribed for other reasons, but may actually help people with bipolar disorder.
Right.
So that's the whole strategy of repurposing medications. And just to give you an example, we are repurposing and studying a medication that is used to lower blood lipids, triglycerides. And this particular medication called bezafibrate, and it's the category of what's called fibrates. These medications may have very beneficial effects on people's brains. And particularly for people with bipolar disorder, I think you're really going to like this idea. There is a lot of data that suggests that for some people with bipolar disorder, it is not a mood disorder. Instead, it's an energy dysregulation disorder.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about energy as a metaphor. I'm talking about energy as a physical thing, a physics thing. And it really has to do with how our brains use energy, how our brains make energy, and how that very complicated process can go awry and be dysregulated in some people. So my point is that the medication that helps with blood lipids, blood triglycerides, that theoretically it should also impact the way that our brains use energy in a positive way.
That is wildly interesting. I remember when I first got put on the medication that I'm on, the doctors, I did my research on the internet, and it said that most of it was for anti-seizure medication. And I was like, why are they giving me anti-seizure meds? And then I looked, I did some more research, and, a lot of the medicine, correct me if I'm wrong, that they've figured out works for bipolar disorder was at one time used for something else.
And in fact, the good news and the bad news is that there is one medication that was developed for bipolar disorder, and that's lithium, which was last developed in 1948.
Yes.
In the backwaters of Australia.
Okay.
And ever since then, every other medication used for bipolar disorder was not developed for bipolar disorder.
That is really interesting. I had an adverse reaction to lithium, so I couldn't take it, but it seems to work for a lot of people, and then, it stops working. It's a really interesting drug, to say the least.
Lithium is so weird that it is the simplest medication in all of medicine. It's a simple ion.
Okay.
Right? So there's nothing simpler than that, but it does unbelievably complicated things, and does many things that protects people's brains in multiple ways. Probably about a third of people who are given lithium do really, really well with it, not only in the short term, but in the long term.
Right. Yeah. People swear by it. And then there's people that are like, get that stuff away from me. It's really polarizing, it, for a lack of better word, drug. That's so interesting about this energy deficiency that you're talking about. I would love to hear more about this. I feel like you want to say something.
Sure. So the energy producing parts of our cells are the mitochondria.
Okay.
And, if you read up on mitochondria, they're one of the weirdest things ever.
I remember drawing them in science class. They were the coolest thing to draw, was the mitochondria. I know exactly what it looks like in my brain, but
yeah, they back in evolution, these like little mitochondrial things crawled into cells and then became part of them.
Yeah.
So they have a separate DNA they're very complicated in terms of how you make them, how you don't make them. Our 3-pound brains take up 20 to 25% of our bodily energy. So our brains are very energy intensive. It's very costly to maintain our brains.
Yeah.
That's because you're making proteins, you're making neurotransmitters, you're making the things that hold the transmitters in little lipid cells. Your brain is very dynamic, so you're making and breaking connections all of the time. That all costs energy.
Yeah, decisions, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
It all costs energy, right? Thinking costs energy, not thinking costs energy. So again, it takes up a lot of your calories. And it's all through the mitochondria. And one thing that's also weird, the mitochondria travel where they're needed. And there's a whole transport system that takes them where they need to go. And there's some indication for some people with bipolar disorder, the whole mechanism by which you make energy in the mitochondria can be slightly dysregulated. It turns out if your mitochondria don't work at all, you can't live, right? Okay. Because you and I probably ate a meal today, and you and I probably took a breath or two today. Your eating and breathing is what's providing you with the fuel to make your energy. And you're making trillions of energy-related molecules every second. Otherwise, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't move, you couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything.
Right.
And again, there's some convergent data that for some people with bipolar disorder, that very complicated process is slightly off. Enough that when you're, it's sort of like if you have a souped up car that needs a lot of energy, if there's something slightly wrong with it, it's not going to work well.
Yeah.
So there's there are a bunch of us in the field who are trying to say, okay, if that's true for some people, that there's this dysregulation in mitochondrial generated energy, could we help people by giving them things that would correct that? And so that's what, that goes back to the story of why on earth would I give somebody a medication that helps with their blood lipids?
Yeah.
Well, because there's this whole complicated thing related to how those medications work and how you make mitochondria. And it turns out, you may have heard, and people may have told you in your journey, exercise is good for your brain.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why is that?
Gets the mitochondria going.
Well, it's a very complicated chain of events that it gets your mitochondria going.
In simple terms.
In simple terms.
Yeah.
I could give you a whole alphabet soup of what happens, but it will sound like complete gobbledygook.
Yeah. Well,
but I do have a challenging but amazing book recommendation.
Please.
That'll give you a very good idea of what this whole business is about mitochondria. And it's called The Vital Question by Nick Lane.
The Vital Question
by Nick Lane.
By Nick Lane.
And,
okay.
And the vital question that Nick Lane asks is, how did life become the way it is now? And he's an evolutionary biologist. And he talks about, like, where did mitochondria really come from? And how did they develop? And what is it that they actually do? It's a little bit of a challenging book, but it's really fantastic.
I find this fascinating because everyone talks about mood, right? I've been hearing about mood since I got this diagnosis and how important it is to keep a baseline mood. But the energy thing is such a real, I don't even know how to explain it properly to people that have never experienced a depression or a mania, but like, it does feel like your energy is either depleted completely and you have none of it left and you can't use it at all, or your energy is, firing at a clip that's way too fast for you to even process what's going through your brain.
Right. So I have what's going to sound like a really weird question.
Okay.
Why is it when people are manic, they literally move around more? And why is it when people are depressed, they literally move around less?
Yeah.
Is it because their mood is they don't feel like moving? Or is it their mood is they want to move a lot? And there's another interesting part of this, which it's not as simple as, okay, so depression is a low energy state and mania is a high energy state. It's actually that both states are phenomenon that come out of a lack of energy. And this is the way it works. So you have a low energy state in depression and you don't have enough energy to put the brakes on, right? It's like you don't have the energy to put the brakes on, and then sort of things just go high energy. But it's not from a lack of energy. It's not from you have too much energy flowing around. It's that you don't have the brake working.
Right. I didn't mean to oversimplify it.
No, that's okay.
I'm just saying how it feels, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I've gone over it before on the pod, how it feels, but this is really something so interesting. I can't wait to read this book. Yeah, that is something.
Yeah, it'll blow your mind in terms of a different view of reality.
It really is right now in real time. Because I mean, mood. What is mood? Mood is like such a oh, you're in a good mood, you're in a bad mood, but energy, yeah, that is wildly interesting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of research that's starting to go into mitochondrial function, and we are collaborating with some great people at Harvard Medical School and the Broad Institute. And this is going to sound a little science fiction-y, but we now can take any cell in a body and deprogram it. So it is no longer that cell, but instead it becomes a cell that can become any other cell, and you can reprogram it. And what you can do is take a blood cell, deprogram it, turn it into the type of cell that can be reprogrammed. It's called a pluripotent cell. Pluripotent, it can become anything.
Okay.
And then you can reprogram it into a variety of brain cells that forms a 3-dimensional 5-millimeter ball that actually communicates with each other. In other words, the cells are like brain cells that are communicating with each other. It's called a brain organoid.
Okay, and what does that do?
What it is it's the closest you can get to a brain biopsy, and you can keep it alive indefinitely. And because you're reprogramming it, it develops over time and changes. The reason I'm telling you this is because one of the things we're in the middle of doing is growing these brain organoids from people who have bipolar disorder, and we will see what the mitochondria are doing within that brain organoid.
Whoa, that does sound science fiction.
But even cooler, we're not only doing that, but what we're trying to do is take a group of people, just a small number of people, who unequivocally responded to lithium, and then they didn't need anything else. They just stayed on lithium, like super duper lithium responders. And then we're taking a bunch of people who clearly didn't respond to lithium. Not that they couldn't tolerate it and had side effects, they just didn't do well with it. And we're going to grow the brain organoids from them and then expose the brain organoids to lithium to try to understand, why did some people respond? Why did some people not respond?
So you're like building little brains in a lab.
Yeah, they're little brains. They can't think, though. We think they can't think.
We think they can't think until they can, and then that's
until
the movie,
they can,
right?
but that's another story.
Then it's a movie, right?
And it's different,
Yeah.
then you got a clone.
Yeah, clone, which, well, okay. So that is really interesting. Wow, you guys are doing some really cool stuff over there. Something we've talked about a bunch on the pod is things we can do besides, psychotherapy and medication that will help us stay sort of baseline, for a lack of a better term. I don't know what the scientific term is for baseline.
I think, yeah, I think the scientific strategy is listen to your mother.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't take drugs, get enough sleep, eat a healthy diet, get exercise, have meaningful relationships, have a purpose in life.
All right. Listen to your mother. Have a purpose in life. That's real simple, huh? These days.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty simple. Listen to your moms, kids. It sounds so simple, right?
Not easy to do.
Not easy to do in practice.
And brush your teeth, because that's a source of inflammation.
What is?
People who don't brush their teeth well, who have bad dental hygiene. It's a source of systemic inflammation.
And that's bad for the brain, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Brush your teeth. Yeah, these are all things your mom told you.
Right.
So simple, yet so hard. Man, my brain is just completely exploding with this information. This is so cool. Yeah, where can people sort of see some more information on what you guys are doing at this hospital, and is there a way to sort of keep up with the progress of these studies, or do they have to be published first? I don't really know how that works, like medically.
Well, we have a listing of the study opportunities on our website, the Dauten Family Center for Bipolar Treatment Innovation. So people can look that up. I am pretty sure we have a Facebook page, although I don't maintain that, other people do. And
sure,
I think there's a Twitter thing also. So that's where you can find a little bit more information about what we're doing.
Okay, cool.
I think the other thing, by the way, it just occurs to me, especially for you and your audience, you can always look at what new research is going on with a very simple website. There's a website called clinicaltrials.gov.
Okay.
And if you go into clinicaltrials.gov and you put in there's a very clear section of what you want to look for. You put in bipolar disorder, you will see every single study that's being done in bipolar disorder.
Okay, that is very cool.
Clinicaltrials.gov. And if you want to see what the National Institute of Mental Health is funding, you can look at NIH Reporter.
Okay. We'll put all these links at the bottom, obviously. Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you would like to mention or say? This has been so informative, obviously, for me. I'm obviously, no doctor or no, but I am a patient, and this meant a lot for you to come on and sort of explain some stuff that's going on at your treatment institute. Any final words of advice or encouragement or anything like that you got, Doc?
Well, I think the one thing that I found helpful for people is that it really is a partnership, and that with people who have bipolar disorder who I try to help, we share decision making. Try to go through options at each decision point of benefits, risks, and to try to help people manage this over their lifetimes. And I have a lot of optimism, and a lot of people can really do well. Other people really need sort of cutting edge treatments or combination of treatments. Also, the data strongly suggests that psychotherapy can really help a lot.
Has for me at least.
And also support and peer support. And the final things that the Depression Bipolar Support Alliance is a great organization if you don't know them at all. I don't know if you've had any contact with them.
I don't think I have. What is it? The Depression?
It's the Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, grassroots.
Okay.
And they have really great resources for people, both locally and nationally. And the other great organization is the International Bipolar Foundation, IBPF. Really great sources of information, of support, other people who've gone through it, and people are really very supportive to each other. And I think these really important resources for people.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. We appreciate it.
Sure. Glad to meet you.
Glad to meet you too. Thank you again.
Sure.